I've spent 3 years trying to understand what happened that night. 3 years of therapy and research, trying to convince myself it was just stress or exhaustion, but I can't deny the truth anymore. Not when I'm watching it happen to the people I love. It started with a road trip. My sister Ellie and I were driving to our cousin's wedding. It was my shift around 3 a.m. when our GPS lost signal on a highway cutting through dense forest in Pennsylvania. Our fuel gauge was near empty when I noticed a small, unmarked road. Something about it caught my attention. "What are you doing?" Ellie mumbled as I turned onto the road. "GPS is down and we're almost out of gas," I explained. "I think there might be a town down here." She checked her phone. "No signal. Are you sure about this?" I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. After about 10 minutes of driving, the trees gave way to open space. We found ourselves on the outskirts of a small town. Something was immediately off about this place. Despite being the middle of the night, every building had lights on meters fully illuminated, yet there wasn't a single person visible anywhere. Just buildings with every light blazing, casting harsh shadows across empty streets. "This is weird," Ellie said. "What kind of town has every light on at 3 a.m.? We drove slowly down the main street. The town wasn't large, maybe 30 buildings total. "There," Ellie pointed. "A gas station." I pulled up to the pump, still unsettled by the town's strange atmosphere. "I'll fill up," I said. "You want to go inside and ask where we are?" Ellie hesitated, which wasn't like her. My sister was usually the brave one. "I don't know, Alex. This place feels wrong." She nodded reluctantly and got out of the car. I watched her walk to the station's store. When she pulled the door open, I turned my attention to the gas pump. That's when I noticed there was no card reader, no screen, no keypad, just an old-fashioned pump with mechanical numbers. I looked back at the store and froze. Through the windows, I could see Ellie standing at the counter, but there was no one behind it. She was just standing there, perfectly still, staring at something I couldn't see. I abandoned the pump and walked quickly to the store, pushing open the door. "Ellie?" I called. She didn't respond, didn't even turn to look at me. She just kept staring at the empty space behind the counter. I approached her, reaching for her shoulder. "Ellie, what's wrong?" When my hand touched her, she finally turned. Her expression was blank, her eyes unfocused. "He says we need to leave," she said, her voice oddly flat. "Who says?" I looked around the empty store. "There's no one here." "The attendant," she insisted, pointing to the vacant space. "He says we're not supposed to be here, that it isn't safe after dark." I felt a crawling sensation on the back of my neck. "Ellie, there's no one there." She blinked several times, then looked back at the counter. Her expression shifted from blank to confused, then to frightened. "But I was just talking to him." "Let's go," I said, taking her arm. As we turned toward the door, the lights in the store flickered, then stabilized. We hurried back to the car. I started the engine and pulled away from the pump. That's when we noticed the change. All the lights in all the buildings had gone out. Every single one. The town was now completely dark, except for our headlights cutting through the blackness. "What the hell?" Ellie whispered. "Did they just turn everything off?" I accelerated down the main street. As we drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched from every darkened window. We were about halfway down the main street when our headlights swept across something that made us both gasp. Standing in the middle of the road was a figure, human-shaped but somehow wrong. It was too tall, too thin, its proportions subtly but unmistakably incorrect, and it was completely motionless, facing away from us. I slammed on the brakes, stopping about 20 feet from the figure. Before I could speak, the figure began to turn. The movement was smooth but too fast, like someone had pressed fast forward on a video. In the harsh glare of our headlights, I could see that it had the general appearance of a man, but everything was just slightly wrong. Its eyes were too large, and spaced too far apart. Its mouth stretched too wide across its face. Its arms hung down past its knees, and it was smiling. "Drive," Ellie said, her voice tight with fear. "Drive around it." I nodded and pressed gently on the accelerator. I steered to the right, intending to give the figure a wide berth. As we began to move, its head turned to follow our movement, not by rotating naturally, but by tilting at an impossible angle, like a doll's head swiveling on a ball joint. We were almost past it when it moved. One moment, it was standing in the center of the road. The next, it was right beside Ellie's window, keeping pace with the car. Despite the fact that we were now moving at about 20 miles per hour, it wasn't running or walking. It was just somehow keeping up with us, its body rigid, its feet seeming to glide just above the pavement. Ellie screamed, and I floored the accelerator. When I checked the rearview mirror, I saw it still keeping pace, now directly behind us. Its smile had grown even wider, stretching literally from ear to ear. I focused on driving, pushing the car faster down the empty street. Finally, I saw the road that would take us back to the highway. I took the turn so fast that the tires squealed. As soon as we were on the narrow road, surrounded once more by dense forest, I checked the mirror again. The figure was gone. We both let out shaky breaths. We drove in tense silence for several minutes. Gradually, my death grip on the steering wheel loosened slightly. We were going to be okay. We had escaped. Then Ellie gasped. "Alex," she said, her voice trembling. "Look at the trees." I glanced at the forest rushing past us, and felt my blood turn to ice. The trees weren't moving the way they should have been. We were driving at nearly 70 miles per hour, but the trees nearest to the road were sliding past at a leisurely pace, as if we were doing no more than 20. And the trees further back weren't moving at all. They remained fixed in place despite our forward motion. "That's not possible," I whispered. "Stop the car," Ellie said suddenly. "Alex, stop the car." I hit the brakes, bringing us to a halt in the middle of the road. We sat there, staring out at the forest around us. Nothing moved, not a branch, not a leaf. There wasn't even the slightest breeze. "We're not moving," Ellie said, her voice hollow with realization. "We've been driving, but we haven't been moving." As if to confirm her words, I noticed something in the rearview mirror, a glow on the horizon behind us. The town's lights were back on, and they didn't look any further away than when we'd first turned onto this road. "We need to turn around," I said. "This road isn't taking us anywhere." I executed a 3-point turn and headed back toward the town, driving much more slowly this time. Neither of us spoke. As we approached the town, I noticed something had changed. The buildings were the same, the layout identical, but now there were people, dozens of them, standing on the sidewalks, in doorways, in windows, all perfectly still, all facing in our direction, waiting, and all of them had the same too-wide smile as the figure we'd seen in the road. "Don't stop," Ellie whispered. "Just drive through. There has to be another way out." I nodded, keeping my eyes fixed on the road ahead, trying not to look at the figures lining our path. None of the waiting figures moved as we passed, but their heads turned in that same unnatural way, following our progress. We tried street after street, increasingly desperate to find a way out. But each street was the same: more houses, more smiling figures, more dead ends or turns that just led us deeper into the town. "We're going in circles," Ellie said, after what felt like hours. "I've seen that blue house 3 times now." She was right. We were somehow looping back on ourselves despite taking different turns. The town was a maze with no exit. "What do we do?" I asked. Ellie was silent for a long moment. Then, "We need to ask for help." "What?" "From them." I gestured at the nearest figure, a woman-shaped thing standing on a porch, her arms too long, her neck too thin, her smile too wide. "We don't have a choice," Ellie said. "We can't get out on our own." We chose a house at random, a small white clapboard structure with a neat front yard. There were 2 figures on the porch, adult-sized, and a smaller one visible through the front window. We got out of the car. The night air was completely still, and oddly cold for summer. The figures on the porch didn't move, but their heads turned to track our approach, their smiles widening slightly. "Hello," I called. "We're lost. We need help finding our way back to the highway." For a long moment, there was no response. Then the taller of the 2 figures raised an arm, pointing directly at us. The movement was stiff, puppet-like. "You're here now," it said, its voice high-pitched and oddly echoing, as if multiple voices were speaking in unison. "You're part of Stillwater now." "We just want to leave," Ellie said, her voice trembling but determined. The smaller adult figure tilted its head backward until it was looking at us upside down, its neck bent at an angle that would have been fatal for a human. "No one leaves Stillwater," it said. "Once you're here, you stay. You become." "Become what?" I asked. Both figures' smiles widened even further, stretching impossibly across their faces. "Like us," they said in perfect unison. "Part of Stillwater." I felt Ellie's hand grab mine. "We need to go," she whispered. "Now." We backed away slowly, not turning our backs on the figures. When we reached the car, we quickly got in and locked the doors. That's when I noticed something. The sky to the east was beginning to lighten. Dawn was approaching. "Maybe we just need to wait it out," I said. "Maybe things will be different in daylight." We parked near what appeared to be a small park in the center of town and waited, watching as the sky gradually brightened. As the first rays of sunlight touched the town, something strange began to happen. The figures lining the streets started to fade, becoming translucent, then transparent, then disappearing altogether. "They're going away," Ellie whispered, hope creeping into her voice. But that wasn't the only change. As the sun rose higher, the town itself began to transform. The pristine buildings we'd seen at night now appeared decrepit and abandoned. Paint peeled from walls, windows were broken or boarded up, porches sagged. Within minutes, the entire town had changed from a perfectly maintained community to what was clearly a long-abandoned ghost town. "I don't understand," Ellie said. "What is this place?" I shook my head. "I don't know, but let's try to leave again." Now, in daylight, the town looked completely different, but we could still make out the road we'd arrived on. I drove toward it, and soon we were back on the highway. We made it to the wedding. We smiled and danced and pretended everything was normal. We never told anyone about what happened in Stillwater, but in the weeks that followed, I began to notice changes in Ellie, subtle at first, a certain stillness in her posture, a delay in her blinking, a smile that sometimes stretched just a fraction too wide. I told myself I was being paranoid, but then others began to notice too. Friends commented that Ellie seemed different, distant. 3 months after our encounter with Stillwater, I went to Ellie's apartment and found it empty. No note, no explanation, just a half-empty cup of coffee on the kitchen counter. She never returned. I filed a missing persons report. I searched everywhere. Nothing. Then, 6 months later, I received a handwritten letter with no return address. It contained just one sentence in Ellie's handwriting. I had to go back to Stillwater. It's where I belong now. I tried to find the town again. I drove up and down that stretch of highway countless times, but I never found the unmarked road, never saw the town again. Subscribe, if you dare.